Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda and I am here with the second of my book club wrap-ups. So my previous video was my library book club wrap-up. I will link to that one down below. After I filmed that one, since when I filmed that one and now that I'm filming this one, I've had my final book club meeting for my marginalized authors book group. So now I'm going to do that one. A little background on this book group. This is one that I started with a friend of mine because we were tired of being in book clubs where you read books by white people, basically. So we only read books by marginalized authors. We do try to tie, except for 1 month. We read a book every other month in this club, but we do meet on the off months to have we just talk about books. We don't have a specific book, but on the even months, we do discuss a book. And we tie it to a heritage month for 5 of those 6 months. In February, that's Black History Month, African American History Month. We do something by an African American author or an African author or someone in the African diaspora. Could be African Canadian, African British, whatever. We aren't picky. We choose an author from there. I keep a list of possibilities that people just add to, so I just pull out the books that fit each time. In April, we do Arab, Muslim, Arab diaspora, anything like that goes into the April selections. We vote. In June, it's either Pride or AAPI. So I put all the books that fall into both of those categories and we just vote on them all together. Since I've done that, like the first month we did a Pride book and the first year we did a Pride book and the second year we did AAPI book, but it could be either one of those. It just depends how the votes fall. In August, we read something by an Indigenous author. That's my favorite. In October, we have 2 again. It's either Latinx or disability. We put all the books there and you vote on them. And then for December, all the books are up. We actually vote twice that month. So I put all the books out on a poll and people vote for any book all the books they're interested in reading. And then any books that don't get any votes out of that round, I take off our list because there's just not interest. We can always add them back later if we want. But we take that out. So then we have our list of books that people have expressed interest in. And from there we do our normal voting and it could be anything. So we had a really successful year, I think. I mean, it was fun. Not all the books were really successful, but I think our conversations were. So I will go through. We read 6 books and I was even there for all of them, which was good because I led the discussions. So it was a good thing I was there. In February, we read Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. I know this is a really popular book among a lot of readers, and we were really looking forward to reading it. I will say our discussion of it, I think that in the book club probably wasn't as positive as a lot of people had, although it was a really good discussion because in our book group, we have both medical professionals and a lawyer. So they were able to bring their viewpoints to that discussion, and there's elements of both in that book. So we were really able to look at it from a different discussion. It was a easy-ish book to read. It wasn't super dense. And I think people kind of enjoyed it. It just wasn't, we found some issues with it just within our group. Mostly from the things I wouldn't think about because I'm not a medical professional that I wouldn't think about, and also some of the legal issues, but we had a decent discussion with it. And then April, we read When We Were Sisters by Fatima Ashgar. So this was a book that I really enjoyed. Some people had trouble reading it. They found it hard to read. If I remember correctly, a lot of people had trouble with it on audio, those who tried to listen to it. But it was actually a really good discussion that we had with it. I enjoyed it. I think generally those of us that finished it really enjoyed it. It is a story about 3 sisters, and it's told through the eyes of the youngest sister. And they're from India, Pakistan. They came during the partition, and I can't remember which side they came from. So they're from India or Pakistan. And their life in America, they're orphaned. They have to live with an uncle who's not a good caretaker. And we had a lot of really good discussion about it. It just was, some people just they found it a little hard to read. In June, we read Clark in Division by Naomi Hirahara, which is a book that I had previously read and really enjoyed. This is a mystery. It is set during World War II, but it's not overly focused on World War II, except as far as the Japanese-American experience. So it's about a family from the Los Angeles area who are then sent to an internment camp. This all happens in the first chapter, and it's all set up to the book. So they're in Manzanar, which is near Death Valley, in case you're wondering where that is. And I did not know this. I learned this from the book, that there was a program for interned families that if they could prove their loyalty to the United States, they could be sent out of the internment camp and resettled in a city, just not the city they came from. And in this family, it's a parents and two sisters, and the story is told through the younger sister's eyes. The older sister achieves this first, and she's sent to Chicago. And then the younger sister and the parents follow. But when the younger sister and the parents arrive in Chicago, they find out that the older sister was killed the day before in an accident, although the younger daughter doesn't think it's an accident, and then plot ensues. That's the setup for the book. I really enjoyed it reading it. I will say this was a book that was it ended up being one of those books that's kind of hard to discuss in a book club. The discussion wasn't as fruitful as some of the ones that we've had. Really not surprising. I think sometimes, unless you're in a genre-based book club and you read a genre book, like if you're a mystery-focused book club and then you can talk about the mechanics of the mystery and everything about that, then those work great. But for our needs, that was a harder discussion to have, although I think people kind of generally liked the book. I loved it. It was a 5-star book for me. And I did read the sequel afterwards, which is Evergreen, which I also enjoyed, although I preferred the first one. But yeah, Clark and Division by Naomi Hirahara. In August, we read Shudder by Ramona Emerson, which I enjoyed more than most people. That being said, I kind of forgot about it because just recently Hannah at Savage Reads talked about it and said I recommended it. And I was like, oh yeah, I read that book, didn't I? So take that as you will. Our general consensus on this one is the details about the main character's indigenous background was very interesting, and sort of the paranormal side of things, how that fit in with her indigenous background. The premise of this is she's a crime photographer, but she can also see ghosts, help solve crimes. That was interesting, but the mystery and the crime were not that interesting, which I can kind of get behind. I will say the first chapter of that book is rough. It is a hard chapter to read. It is very graphic and it is hard. Once you get past that, it's a little bit better. I enjoyed it. I gave it probably a higher rating than most people did in the group. It wasn't a universal hit, but we had enough discussion to discuss with it on the indigenous side of things. Okay, and then in October, we read Olga D Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez. And the opinions were sort of varied on this one. We all had kind of different takes on it. My personal take was that this is a story that kind of has two stories going. There's Olga's story and her brother's story, and I thought Olga's story was very interesting, but I was not at all interested in her brother's story, which is sort of a political one. And so it was I think I gave the book a B. It's not that I didn't like it. It could have been better. There were people who liked it, people who didn't like it. So there was a lot to discuss though, especially from the Puerto Rican viewpoint. This is a book that's very much set in its time. It's set around, Hurricane Maria happens in this book, and the impact on the Puerto Rican families in New York who see Hurricane Maria happen and things that went on. There was a lot to discuss. It is a good book club book. It's just not one that necessarily appeals to everybody, is kind of how I would put that. And then finally, and this is the book we just discussed last night. Do I still have my copy here? Here it is. This way I don't have to put in a picture. We read What Strange Paradise by Omar Al-Akkad. This book was, of those of us who read it, one person did not read it because they just weren't in the mental space, and I respect that. Those of us who read it really enjoyed this book. Lot of discussion, fodder for discussion in this book. It's also one of these books that I'm going to have to reread at some point in the future because you don't really know what this book is until you read the last page. Don't skip ahead. It won't make any sense if you skip ahead anyway. Don't skip ahead. Read the whole book. But now that I have read the whole book, I kind of feel like I want to go back again and read it again and get the pieces to fit together. I do want to give myself some time, but I will be rereading this one. Excellent conversation. There was a lot to discuss in this. It is a hard subject, and the author, Omar El-Akkad, is of Syrian descent. He's Canadian citizen, but he lives here in Portland, Oregon. I live in the suburbs. He was a journalist, and this book, this book is not like an article. It's not like journalism. It's a very well-written fiction. But because he was a journalist, he points out things that are uncomfortable truths in that book. And I really appreciated that. It gave us a lot to discuss. So yeah, if you're looking for book club books, this is definitely one that I would recommend. And I would probably also recommend Olga D Dreaming, even though that wasn't, as far as enjoyability, wasn't as much of a hit as this one. Not that this one really felt like you can enjoy it, because it is pretty dark, but you know what I mean. Like, this was... I was much more satisfied reading this book than I was reading Olga D Dreaming. So we had a great year, great discussions. Even the book Clark and Division, which, we struggled with having a discussion with, we still, it was still a good book to read. And that's what I really like about this book club, is we force ourselves to be diverse. We are reading, I don't know what we're reading next year other than our February pick, which we just decided on last night, which will be The Good House by Tananarive Due. But we vote as things come up, and I will be discussing them on my channel as I read them, so you can kind of follow along with me. But I am really enjoying this book club, and that's my book club year. I do belong to some other book club-like things, one of which is my postal book group, which I will not be covering on this channel specifically because our year is a little bit off. Like, we have 7 people in our group, which means our year is like 14 months long. So we're still in our year, and I don't want to discuss the books. People haven't read them all yet. So, and I even haven't read all the books for this year, this cycle, I guess. So I can't really talk about it. But of the 2 that are more traditional, my library book club and this one, both of which, by the way, we do on Zoom. My library book club, it had been in person, and then the pandemic, it went to Zoom. And, when the pandemic sort of lifted, we took a vote. We decided to stay on Zoom because we had a person, it was a friend of someone who was in our club, but she lived in Colorado, started joining us. And obviously she could not come to in-person meetings. We also had people who were snowbirds, so they weren't in the area the entire year. And we had some people with mobility issues. We just decided it was easier to do on Zoom. And then Marginals and Margaritas, we started on Zoom because we started it during the pandemic. And we had, one of our members has her child, if he got COVID, it would be really bad. So she was very careful. And we just have kept it on, mostly because we live in different areas, different parts of the Portland metro area, but it does give us the ability to have people, you could be anywhere and be in our book groups. So I'm just saying that, you could be anywhere and be in our book groups. Anyway, I'm starting to babble, so I'll let you go, but thank you for indulging me as I recapped my book club year. And like, subscribe, feel free to join my Discord, information down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.